Have you guys ever attended a workshop that you did not like before?
Yes.
What happened? What is it exactly that our audience is supposed to take away from our talk? What's the goal? When was the last time you felt like you had attended a workshop where the teacher talked 20% of the time and the students talked 80% of the time? So if I'm conducting a workshop that is about 30 to 45 minutes long, how many activities do you think I should plan for? Whether you're experienced at facilitating or whether you've never actually led a workshop before, some things that you want to have in mind when you're conducting a workshop, especially one that's relatively interactive, where there's going to be an audience that you can actually engage with. A lot of the principles that I'm going to be showing you today are coming from my background just as an ESL instructor, because one of the things you learn when you are an ESL instructor, you're teaching people who have learned English as a second language, is you have to be mindful of many, many different cues. And a lot of times, aspects of ESL instruction aren't really specific just to working with people who are learning a language or a second language, but are actually just kind of good practices to consider when teaching and communicating. So there's going to be a couple of steps that I want to go over with you. To go with us over this process tonight, we have a couple people with us. We have Debbie and we have Lee. Thank you both for hanging out with me today. Guess this is going to be our central theme for today. I guess just 5 keys to facilitating. Have you guys ever attended a workshop before?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
One of yours.
Some of my, I appreciate that. Okay.
Many at OPA.
Many OPA poetry workshops and things like that. It could be other workshops as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be writing related. What are some things that you really enjoy about workshops?
I like hearing the different ideas that they come up with because a lot of times they have good ideas on how to improve, I guess, writing poetry. In my case, since I go to a lot of those.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the new ideas that they give you. Okay.
Just learning new things. It's always a great
The
thing.
learning. Okay, so opportunities to learn,
Yep.
take in new information. Okay. Have you guys ever attended a workshop that you did not like before?
Yes.
Or you're like, I would have done things differently, maybe?
Yes.
What happened?
Um,
You don't have to name names, but like, what are some things
I
that?
won't name any names, but yeah, well, what happened was at one of these workshops, um, I think they were saying like kind of all these magical things were supposed to happen when you write, and I didn't see these magical things just like popping out. So I think maybe
Mm,
their perspective was that if you did certain things, all these amazing things would happen with the writing, but I wasn't truly seeing that. So I think that was a little bit confusing for me.
okay. I think something that we'll talk about today is going to help make sure that when we're leading, that our audience doesn't walk away with that same feeling. I think that there's ways we can avoid that. Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned that. Other things that kind of stand out about workshops you attended, and you're like, I didn't really care for that as much, or it wasn't as helpful.
Mm, sometimes I've seen it where the person doesn't seem very prepared.
Lack of
Like,
preparation.
yeah, they just come and
Well,
they go, "Oh yeah, I just threw this together."
Mm.
And,
Okay, so presentation is important. I totally understand that.
I mean, years ago, I went to this workshop that David Baker held, and it was amazing because I think he basically pointed out that one poem I was telling you about, the T.R. Hummer poem about
Hmm.
the person falling in into the silo, how that was like falling in love. But then what was amazing about it is he said this really good trick that he said is really good to write with poems, in which I don't know whether I do it. Maybe I do it sometimes, but where you can basically stick two different poems together, and actually you can make a much stronger poem out of that
Mm.
if they combine well.
Hmm. The
So
nice
I
thing
thought
about
that,
poems, yeah, is you put any two poems together, they can like just like side by side, not like combine them, but like, you put them, they're going to enter into some sort of conversation with each other.
Yeah.
And then finding ways to even link it together is interesting too.
Yeah, and that particular poem was really pretty amazing because
Mm.
the person was watching um, the person that they loved fall asleep, but then and they were also falling in love with them, but then he was saying it was like a boy jumping into a silo, and then he
Hmm.
combined it,
Hmm.
and those two things were just really amazing.
Perfect. So it sounds like he gave kind of like these very practical things to walk away with,
Hmm.
which I think kind of gets to some of the things that we're going to be discussing as well as we dive into facilitating. Okay. So what we just did right now, and this isn't one of the actual techniques just yet, but this is some of the settings I've been in. They kind of called this like a rose and a thorn. So talking about things that kind of went well versus things that you found to be challenging or difficult. So these are some things that I think to constantly put us into a reflective mindset as we're preparing our presentations and as we're preparing to facilitate, constantly kind of being aware of what are the things that our audience is going to walk away with that they enjoyed versus the challenges that may come up. And then taking note of them, whether a mental note or actually writing notes, and then using them to get even better for the following time. But let's actually dive into the specific techniques. So again, there's 5 specific ones. There's obviously many more, but these are the 5 that I would encourage us to begin thinking about as we organize our presentations for October. First things first, and I think this leads indirectly to what you mentioned about presentation, Debbie, is thinking about the takeaway. What is it exactly that our audience is supposed to take away from our talk? What's the goal? It's the same thing with art. When you make a piece, what's the goal of your piece? If you're writing something, what's the goal of what you're writing? But the key thing is, what are they going to walk away with that they didn't have at the beginning? Because everything that we do during the workshop, so again, these talks will be about 30, 45 minutes long. So during your 30 to 45-minute session, or any session that you lead, I should say, what is it you want people to walk away with, and how is every part? So, like, how is your hook? The way you open your presentation, how is that serving the ending? How are the exercises you have people walk through? How is that serving the ending? How are all the words you're using to describe it? How is that serving the ending? Everything is in the interest of the primary takeaway that you want your audience to have. Questions for me about this first key component?
Takeaway's the key component.
Hmm.
First one. That's the first
That
one.
this is the first
The
one.
takeaway.
The takeaway. What do you want your audience to walk away with when your presentation is done? Like,
Be inspired.
imagine it certainly could be inspiration. It could be that. Um, the one thing I would say is that with inspiration, it's sometimes like you go to a talk and you feel really empowered, but you don't really know what to do with that empowerment. Afterwards, like, yeah, I feel really inspired to do something, but what do I do? Um, I'm a big fan of having something that's really practical. Like, for instance, Debbie mentioned that strategy. She walked away with a strategy. She's like, hey, when I'm writing a poem, I can actually think about, if I had these 2 pieces that were supposed to like kind of fit together in a way, what would
Hmm.
that look like? That's a specific strategy.
Yeah.
It's not just that she felt inspired to write. It's
No.
that she felt inspired to write and she has no way to channel that energy.
Yeah, and that was
No,
exciting because I can still remember this, and I think
And
I
you still
heard
remember it,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that when I heard this, this was over 15 years ago, and I still
That's wild.
remember it.
Yeah.
And I
no, I,
use that strategy sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Leland?
no, I meant like I want the audience to walk away inspired because like the title of my book says poems inspired by the Lord. So I want
Right.
He's inspired me, so I hope they inspire them too. That's what I meant by inspired.
Exactly. For sure. I understand that. The one thing I would say is that inspiration is great, and I think that can be a goal. Inspire them, but I think having something that can also be something concrete to do to channel with the energy. It's not just feeling inspired, but being like, okay, I feel inspired to do something, and I know what the next step is also to do. So it's having like kind of a game plan.
Hmm.
Sometimes we feel really motivated, but then we don't. The problem is if you don't channel anywhere, it kind of goes away after a while, and we don't want it to
Yeah.
vanish so soon.
Yeah.
So this is our first takeaway. I mean, the first technique is the takeaway.
Techniques.
I don't know what that is.
Ooh, this is I'm sending you into pedagogy mode now. Okay.
Oh, okay.
If there's any teachers that are watching this in the replay, have you ever heard of TT versus ST? This is huge right now in the ESL world. I don't know so much about
Yes.
general pedagogy.
I
Any
have
ideas what
So
this
that
could
thing in
be?
the that thing in the middle is supposed to be versus ST. TT versus
Like
ST.
comparing, yeah, TT versus ST. Okay.
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
I can't
TT.
even guess unless you can tell me. I can guess. Like, what is it teacher and then student teacher?
Really close. That was actually very good. Okay. Teacher talk, student talk.
Oh, okay.
Teacher talk, student talk. But very good guess, Debbie. What do you think that could mean? So I said what it stands for. What does that mean? Teacher talk, student talk.
It sounds like there's a certain way that teachers tend to talk and a certain way that students tend to talk. And then there's a certain way that communication takes place between the two of them. Sounds like
I
it.
don't disagree. Let's talk quantity. Imagine you're in a workshop setting, or you're in someone's facilitating something that you're attending. What do you think is the best ratio for teacher talk to student talk? What ratio do you want? 50-50?
No.
About 1 to 3.
So for every 1 minute the teacher talks, you want students talk for 3 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like 20% teacher talking and 80%
Wow.
student talking.
Okay. So let me throw this back to you. When was the last time you felt like you had attended a workshop where the teacher talked 20% of the time and the students talked 80% of the time?
Not usually.
It's not usual. What ratio do you think is very common? Not the ratio that you want, but what's the ratio that you think? If you went to like a poetry workshop, what do you think the ratio would be?
75 teacher, 25
Wow.
Yeah, I was gonna say 80-20. So
Yeah. I think for a lot of teachers, I think for a lot of workshops, that's very common. I think it's very common for teacher talk to dominate.
Yeah.
The problem with that,
well,
Leland?
ain't they supposed to dominate because they're the teacher? The student shouldn't be talking. I'm there to learn, so I want the teacher to do most of the talking.
There's different types of learning. I think one of the things that we see with learning is that if I just do everything for you, it's very difficult for you to learn. At some point, we have to engage in the act ourselves. One of the dangers that can happen with teacher talk, you can see this again. I'm pulling from ESL contexts where these are students that they're trying to learn the language, they're trying to master the skill. But if the teacher is doing all the work, it's very hard for the students to acquire the skill. We're not saying for the teacher to be silent, although there are some schools of thought that push for that. But we are saying, especially, we're dealing with adults. We're dealing with people. When we're doing these workshop sessions in October, most of the attendees are going to be older. Okay. So they don't necessarily need as much hand-holding as we think. Letting people arrive to their own conclusions. How can I, in my workshop, minimize, the amount of teacher talk I do and give more time to the students to arrive at their own conclusions? And then if they are misguided, then I can step in. That's when I do the teacher talk.
You can start by maybe giving some kind of test or a survey, see what they know first.
That's a great strategy. So there actually is a strategy called test, teach, test, where like imagine you start a workshop, you give someone a test, then you talk through all the questions that you give, and then at the end of class, you give the test again, and you see how the improvement students make. That is an actual strategy. I like that. What are some other ways you think that we can minimize? Yeah, Leland, I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's when that way I can know what questions I'll have so I can talk more as the student.
Yeah. There's a concept called washback, which that refers to. It's like you know what's there and you're prepared for it, so you can think about it more. What are some other strategies I can do if I want to limit how much talking I do and give more time to the students?
After you introduce a concept, then you can ask them if they have any questions.
Okay. I'm going to come back to this point that you mentioned, Debbie. I think it's a good one, but I want us to be mindful about the ways that we give those questions to students. Okay. Because there is a concept that's going to be really important for us. But I agree.
I was going to say maybe like see if anybody wants to come up to the speak up and see what present something they have.
Mm,
That way they're doing the talking to
okay.
the class too.
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because this is getting into a third technique that I want us to be mindful of. So I want to talk about face because I think this is relevant for our discussion right now. Have you guys ever heard of face or saving face before?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What does it
saving
mean?
face.
What does it mean?
Uh, to kind of cover up something you might have messed up, but it was still a good thing, but you didn't come off quite right. So you're trying to save face by correcting it without being too noticeable, maybe.
That last part you said is getting much closer to it. That aspect you're trying to do something. So why are you trying to do it in a way that's not noticeable? What happens if people notice it?
Well, you didn't save face, you got caught.
What happens
Um,
if you don't save face?
you might feel
Uh,
like people think that you're not. For example, if you're trying to teach somebody something, but yet you mess up, you might think that they might think that you're not as knowledgeable or as much of an expert on that subject.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so everyone has a degree of pride. Everyone has a sense of esteem. And it's very easy for that to shift depending on power dynamics. And anytime you have two people in a room, there's a power dynamic. And when you're a facilitator, it only gets amplified. There's the leader, and then there's people who are participating, right?
Hmm.
We need to be, as facilitators, teachers, people in leadership, we need to be very mindful of this concept of face. Because let's say I have a participant who's very, very shy. And I say, hey, shy student, do you know the answer? How do they feel?
They wouldn't feel good at all.
They would not feel very good at all, would they? Especially like imagine
if
it's like a group of like 50 people and
Oh,
you
that'd be
called that.
embarrassing.
It's very embarrassing. Okay. So you're
at
starting to get
least they know the
tangy.
answer. At least they know the answer and stand up like, yeah, I know that answer.
I
So
think even if they
if they
know the
work,
answer, they might be nervous. I don't know.
it depends.
It does
You
depend. Now,
never know.
some
Everybody,
students don't care. Hmm.
yeah, and depending on like, see, I had public speaking, so I don't get embarrassed as much in public
Hmm.
no more. But
Not
not
everyone
everybody's
has
had
that
that
training.
opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
exactly. Yeah. So this goes back to some of those suggestions that we were talking about earlier about student talk time, teacher talk time. I think it's great to do sorts of activities and providing questions that get students to think about and reflect and give their own responses. But I want us to be mindful about the way that we do that. A lot of times, a whole group setting, like imagine it's you and 15 people, that whole group setting for some people has some disadvantages. Not everyone is going to be willing to talk. The people who are willing to talk will dominate. The people who have good ideas but aren't willing to talk, you're never going to hear from them, so you don't know their. You also don't know how well the room understands the things you're saying. There are some inherent issues with the whole group model. So, and in addition to this concept of face, okay. So one thing we can do to help students save face is by one providing questions that are more open ended versus closed, where there's like a right or wrong response. And especially the workshops we're talking about are art related, so of course it's going to be pretty open for a lot of discussions, right? Um, there's also different ways to group students, and this goes back to our previous topic as well, teacher talk and student talk. And ironically, I know I'm doing a lot of teacher talk right now, but I want to make sure we get this workshop concluded in a reasonable amount of time. There's different types of activities you can do. So instead of doing a whole group, there's a concept called like think, pair, share, where basically you give a question, you have students pair up with the person sitting next to them, or you can switch up groups. They talk with their partner about it, and then you go to the whole group. So now, instead of calling people on the spot with no time to think, they've had time to process, discuss an answer, and then the answer that they give also is going to feel a little bit safer because they don't have to talk about their own thought necessarily because that might make them uncomfortable, but they can talk about what their group talked about, and that might be easier. So instead of saying, well, I think this, you could say, well, my partner and I discussed this. That shift can make people feel a little bit safer in a classroom space or in a workshop space. Okay. Activities like that, trying to lean away from just calling people out, lean away from the whole group sort of discussion, and getting involved in activities that involve either individuals or small groups. These sorts of opportunities can help save face. Also, because you as a teacher, one thing you can do, whereas when you're facilitating, is as the pairs or as groups are talking to each other, you can cycle around. You can sit with the group and kind of see what they're discussing. And you can start getting an idea of the things you're saying, which leads into our next tactic here, which is comprehension checks. Okay. How do you know if the people in your workshop are understanding the things you're saying?
You can ask.
Could.
Are you picking up what I'm putting down?
Okay. So, Lee, you ask me, hey, Jeff, you understand what I'm saying? And I say, yes. So we're good?
No, I do a follow-up question. Okay, if you understand, tell me whatever we're discussing. I'll tell them, give me an example.
So now we're getting back into that kind of face discussion. A little
Well,
bit.
how else can you check if they're comprehending
Okay.
without either asking or testing them?
This is the question. How can we check people's comprehension? Any ideas? Besides, the way you're talking is valid. That is one way to check it. But what other ways can we do?
Test.
Let's talk more about tests. I think tests is an interesting answer. How do you test someone?
Uh, like a test.
Okay.
So many questions worth so many points.
Okay. That is one option. So you give people a test. What are some other ways that we can check comprehension?
Maybe there's a way to apply it. Like, for example, if you're telling people, if you're asking, well, okay, if you're doing a talk and you want people to put more imagery into their poetry, so maybe what you could have them do is you could have them try to write a few lines of poetry, or maybe 4 or 5 lines of poetry, where they can try to put more imagery into those lines, and maybe have
Okay.
them do it where they show it where they don't make where it's more flat and more prose-like, and then they can do it where they show how they really put in that imagery, how they put the emotion. So there's contrast.
I like it. So this is where we start to get into like project-based, activity-based learning. So instead of having a situation where you just give people a test, which is another option, or where you just ask orally a question and have people answer, which is another way to do it. You could do also what I talked about earlier with like think, pair, share. So as people are discussing with their partners in small groups, your job as a facilitator isn't just to look at the clock. No, your job as a facilitator is to sit with groups and listen to their discussion and see what's in alignment with what your expectations and see what's out of alignment. So then you can steer people in the right direction. This is another way to check comprehension. But
So you're
another
saying
way
like
is
a
to,
So you're saying like a project, like say if I'm
yeah,
teaching how to fix brakes, and I think they were not sure they comprehended. Let them show me. Show me how to fix brakes. Let me
So
show them if
that
they
could,
picked it up.
so
Give them
you
a
could do
project to
this.
show me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But if I want to, again, let's think about that concept of face again, where imagine you give the idea of like, you gave the example of like fixing brakes. Imagine it's a whole group and I call one person up to the front of the room and like, hey, fix this brake. That's a lot of pressure on that student. So what you could, another alternative could be if you have a group of 10 students, you pair students up, you have 5 breaks that need to be fixed. Each group gets a break, and then with their partner, they try to fix it. So now instead of putting it in front of the whole class, you're going as a teacher from group to group to group to see how they're doing. Do you see? I just changed the stakes a little bit, and I made it a little bit more comfortable for the students. Okay. If we're thinking poetry, kind of like what Debbie said, like for instance, if we're trying to incorporate more imagery, with a group or individually, they could work on imagery. This is where we get into a concept called scaffolding. So, for instance, Debbie, let's use this example that you said. You could say, hey, write 4 lines and use more imagery. You could say that. But the problem with that is there's no real scaffold. They could write whatever. What about the parts of the line that have nothing to do with image? Well, they still have to write it because they need to arrive at the image, right? But what if we're trying to work on imagery? What if I give them a poem and then I leave a blank and I say, hey, in this blank, focus on image?
Yeah,
This
that
is
would work.
this is scaffolding because now we're not worried about anything else. We are only worried about the element we're concentrating on. Okay.
Hmm.
There's another activity I like to do a lot when I'm teaching or leading workshops. Some of you have done this with me, in fact. There's a activity called stations, where around the room I might have like 5 pieces of paper that each paper has a different exercise on it. And let's use Debbie's example. So let's say I have 5 stations around the room. At each station, there's a piece of paper with a poem with a blank in it where you need to write an image. Each poem's different. So at station 1, I do one poem and do an image. At station 2, I do another poem with a different image. It's like by the end of the class, students have worked on 5 different problems. They cycle through. They spend 1 minute at one station, then we cycle. Then they spend 1 minute at another station, then we cycle. And we keep going. And then I, as a facilitator, I can do comprehension checks, right? Because I can look at the paper. I can see the paper I could stay at one station and just see how the students work through it. And I can see, yes, they're understanding image, or, oh, I'm seeing a lot of students are having some trouble with image here. I need to talk about that with everyone in a moment. Things like that. Everything you do as a facilitator is an opportunity to check comprehension. It's constant. It's a constant dialogue. It's constant observation. So as you're facilitating, be asking yourself, what are the activities that I can do to make sure that, again, what was our first point? Our very first point was the takeaway. So the comprehension checks and the activities I do are all tools to make sure that the students leave with the takeaway that I want them to leave with. Everything's connected.
Yeah.
Questions about that?
Um, I'm just thinking if we have like 35 or 45 minutes, we might be kind of restricted on how many activities we can do.
Oh my gosh, what a great segue. So our final tactics I want to talk about. I want to talk about the 8 to 10 rule. Okay. We are working in October. We're going to be mostly with adults. Okay, if you're working with kids, it's a little bit different, but with adults, adults have decent attention spans for the most part, which means that your adult most likely can stay focused for about 8 to 10 minutes before they start to lose focus. So if I'm conducting a workshop that is about 30 to 45 minutes long, how many activities do you think I should plan for?
No more than 3.
Yeah,
I,
that sounds about right.
I would, if it were me, I'd probably be planning 5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'd be planning a warm up. I mean, I'd be planning a warm up activity, a warm up hook activity. That's my first one. I would need a close activity at the end. One activity is probably going to be the central discussion, the big takeaway that I want students to have. And then I'm doing 2 exercises to arrive there.
So you can make
So,
about each one about 5-6 minutes. That way
yep,
you're in the 8 to
Wow,
10 rule.
yep,
this is gonna be
you
so
got it.
fast.
It is fast.
Oh wow.
It's very fast.
I don't think I've gone to any workshop like this with so much activity.
You haven't.
Usually, no, I have not. Not
You've
so
also,
much.
but you've also been to workshops where they just talk at you the entire time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then they might give you 10 minutes to write a poem or something.
Right. Yeah.
That's the usual thing. Usually it's
Yeah.
2 hours or something. I
Yeah.
mean, I've seen a bunch of shorter ones that are like
I know.
an hour, but
Yeah.
usually they talk the whole time and
I
then you
know.
get the last 10 minutes to write something.
You're right. I know. I've been there. I get it.
That's the
You
usual style.
you don't have to follow any of the things I'm saying to be clear, but I think that if you follow these steps, you're going to get a workshop that is going to feel more rewarding for the people who are participating, and also is going to be more rewarding for you because you're going to have a much greater understanding of where your audience is at.
Okay. That's
Like
a lot.
those generative exercises. I mean those generative workshops you were talking about, Debbie. Like where they only give you 10 minutes, like that could have been interspersed throughout the entire workshop.
Yeah, it could have.
You know, that could
But
have been
usually
throughout the
it
entire
doesn't.
thing.
Usually it doesn't happen, and sometimes they even run out of time.
Yeah.
They're like, just take these sheets home and do it at home, because they're still
You,
talking.
you talked earlier about preparation. To me, that's lack of preparation. Okay. Or they're not being honest about what the takeaway was. The takeaway wasn't ever to generate, if that's what
Or
ends
it
up
sound like
happening.
they talk too long and they say, you know what? Oops, I talked too long, so just take it home with you.
Yeah, that happens
Sound
a
like
lot. Yeah,
it's
a
like
lot of
they give their
times.
allotted time.
hmm A lot of times they just run out of time. Yeah.
I think one thing we have to understand the literary industry is a lot of people who are teaching have never actually learned pedagogy and haven't actually learned about the psychology of learning and things like that. They're just doing what they were taught, which was taught by people who also never learned, and the cycle continues.
Okay. Okay. This is good. This is good to
Okay.
know. It's gonna have to be fast then.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd be
Okay.
planning, and you know, it's okay to have like an activity to be like, you know what, this is my backup activity. I might not get to it. Overplan. It's good to overplan. Maybe you only get to 4 of your activities. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I'd rather you have too much plan than not enough plan.
Okay.
And
But
just saying I don't have enough plan, so we'll just do writing time. No, I think that's a pretty lazy approach. Personally, a pretty lazy approach to handling this. I'll be honest.
yeah.
But what if writing time is part of the plan?
Yeah. If
Okay.
it's writing plan. Yeah, and I think it's hard for people to when they only get 10 minutes. It's just hard. I guess
S-
not too bad. I mean, I could crank something out, but
So,
it's hard.
so this goes back to that concept of one, decide what your takeaway is. If the takeaway is truly something that's generative, then yeah, that's going to change things here, right?
Yeah.
But if the takeaway is something else, like you're trying to teach a craft point, and you're like, okay, I want to teach this craft point, but I also want people to be able to write. What do? Well, this is where you can do some of these things we talked about. Like, for instance, when you're doing your activity, scaffold. Don't have them write a whole poem. Have them write one line of a poem that's already mostly complete. You know, have them finish the second half of a metaphor. You know,
hmm
like
Okay.
scaffold it. So
Yeah.
that way, that's also going to save time. So they don't have to do the other work.
Yeah. When I went to this one OPA one that they had Yali, right?
Hmm.
And what she did was she did scaffolding where she basically had like I think a couple of lines in the front of it and a couple of
Mm-hmm.
lines in the back of it she already had written. And
Yeah,
then she just told you to write a few lines in the middle.
that's all you need,
Yeah.
and it's going to feel more focused.
It was very focused.
Yeah, because it's going to target the specific point you're trying to teach them.
Yeah, and also, of course, everything sounded good because her lines in the front and the back were written by herself. So they were all great, and then just had our stuff in the middle.
You have much more control if you're willing to put in the time to scaffold. And this goes back to the presentation aspect and the preparation, because the scaffold you have to prepare because you have to know what you're going to teach and you have to prepare to scaffold.
Mm, okay. Okay, and that was the first time I had ever seen anyone do that, was what she did with the scaffold in the front and the back.
I
And she
approve of
was,
what she did. Yeah, I like
yeah,
that.
and she was very, very prepared, I have to say. Her talk was really good.
And you still remember it now.
Hmm.
Think of all the talks that you don't remember. Is
Yeah,
that the
there's a
talk
lot
you
I
want to
don't.
give? Yeah. Is that the kind of talk you want to give, or do you want to give the talk that people remember 15 years later?
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
So to recap, um, again, 5 keys to facilitating. Think about your takeaway. Limit teacher talk time. I'll be honest, a teacher talk to student talk of 20 to 80 is hard. That is very hard. But we can try. 8 to 10 rule. We're changing our activities within every 8 to 10 minutes. Comprehension checks. You are constantly trying to observe how well your participants are understanding the message that you're giving them. Face. I would say in general, try to avoid whole group interactions. It's okay to have some whole group discussion. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're doing comprehension checks and things like that, this is where those other activities that we talk about are going to be very, very valuable. You don't want to enter into a power struggle with your students. It's the last thing we want. Because if your student starts to get defensive, it's going to become a battle between you and them. All right, just some final logistics for the presentations in October. Okay, so they're going to be the conference is at Stanza. Okay, the space is relatively small. I'm in talks looking at a venue because I want to have people who are presenting actual talks. We'll probably be at the Stanza, and then I'm looking at another space where if people have more generative writing exercises, I'm going to try to move people there. One thing I will say, the spaces we're operating with, there is no Wi-Fi. Okay, so if you have materials, you'll probably want to bring in some printouts, handouts. Yes, just to know. I'll have better ideas on attendance numbers in the future. Okay. I have a projector. I'd like not to use it because I think sometimes people get overly reliant on like PowerPoint and stuff like that. So I would say for now, plan on not having a projector and kind of keeping it conversation talk focused. But if people are like, Jeff, I really, 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 really need a projector, we can talk. Okay. The talks are short,
Okay.
right? It's like 30 to 45 minutes. That's not a long talk. Okay. I
So
think
instead
we'll
of
be
a
okay
TED
without
talk,
these.
will be a Jeff talk.
I mean, again, these are workshops. We're facilitators. If you want to approach it as like giving like leading like a talk like TED, I mean, you can. I would
I meant like a
say
TEDx talk. Instead of or 10. What's
ag-
that? A 10x talk?
no. There's TEDx. Yeah, I
Well,
understand. I would personally prefer something that's a little bit more interactive. I'll be honest, but ultimately that decision is up to you for people who are presenting. All right.
okay.
Other
So
questions for me about things? Yes.
I was noted this Saturday you're at the museum.
Not this Saturday. It is the
23rd or something.
it's the 23rd, I believe.
Okay. In the email, like it said Saturday. So you didn't say a date.
Got you. I'll
I was
double
just
check.
checking.
Yes. Yeah. Aiming for the 23rd.
Okay. And that was it for me.
Cool. I'm glad you could make it, sir. Debbie, any questions from you?
Um, no, it was just a lot different than what I was thinking in my mind. Because what I was thinking in my mind, what I was thinking was like the typical thing, right? I was thinking, okay, we'll do a talk and then people will ask questions at the end, or we do like a little bit of an intro and then people start writing. Like,
You can
writing
do
a
that. I
poem?
don't want to say that you can certainly do that. What I will say though is I think this has the opportunity to be something that's a little bit more memorable, and your students walk away with something they connect with on a deeper level. Personally,
Okay.
my own biases are coming through.
Yeah. So when you do workshops, is it more like
It's more like what we talked about today.
okay, but then when we do like when you do the other stuff like the Business Institute and stuff like that, that's more like where you're talking but you're asking questions.
The business, because those are so small. It's different when you have 3 people versus if you have 15, right?
Hmm. Okay.
In some ways, you can do more when you have that 15.
Oh, I see. Okay. Got it. Okay. All right. I'll need to think about it. Because
Things to
I've
think
never
about.
I've never done that other stuff that you're talking about. I mean, when I did it that one time,
I
um,
understand.
I just basically went through like the poems and why
Yeah.
they were strong, and then had them generate at the end
Mhm.
poems.
Again, nothing wrong. You don't have to. You can certainly do an approach like that too.
Yeah, yeah. I've never tried this group stuff. I have to think about it.
Okay.
Are you going to be doing some of this group type stuff when you like during the retreat?
Depends on how many people we have.
Okay.
Right now we're pretty small. You know.
Okay. So it might be more focused then. Okay. Okay. Yep. I have to do some thinking because this would be very new for me.
Okay. If you want to
'Cause
talk through anything, let
okay.
me know. I'm here.
Yeah, I'll have to ask you because, pretty much I've seen the exact same thing that I've been talking about. I've seen a talk, and then
Yeah.
they always either generate some talk with nothing or
Right.
talk, and then you get like 10 minutes to just write stuff real fast, and then you might talk about it. But usually people don't want to talk about it because 10 minutes isn't enough to generate something really great. So
It's that, and also they haven't really been. This goes back to the thing about face and things like that. We haven't. The facilitators haven't put this the members in a position to have something to talk about. Honesty.
yeah.
If there was more scaffolding around it, if the facilitator considered like face a little bit more, people would have been a little bit more conducive to sharing.
Okay.
In all honesty,
Okay. Because the
some
first time I ever
yeah,
saw anybody do any scaffolding was
yeah.
Yali's talk.